Islands look simple from the ferry, yet up close they turn into a tangle of borders, door seams, tide lines, and horizons that act like blades. The comforts everyone chases, breezes, sunsets, uncomplicated days, sit right on those edges where one thing stops and another begins. In these three accounts, a tall, silent figure ignores the views and studies the margins like a cartographer with bad news. Read with your eyes on the sides of the page because the trouble here doesn't rush, it sharpens. Story 1, check in at low tide. I booked the island for quiet sand and predictable tides, the kind you can time by clinking glasses. The shuttle driver kept a tide table in his lap and swore everyone becomes an explorer here, even the stubborn ones. Our bungalow's shutters breathed like a patient animal, opening and settling in a rhythm I didn't recognize but immediately felt. A shadow measured the seam between the French doors before I saw anyone to cast it, sliding along the joinery with the care of a tailor. We did normal vacation things, half-finished drinks, staged candids, dinner on the deck, and pretended the wind tapping the wood was only wind. The rail felt too close to the water, as if the sea had come to negotiate terms. At dawn, footprints appeared on the deck and ended at the rail like a sentence with no period. No prints in the sand below, no scuff where a heel would have landed, just that clean stop. The front desk offered smiles, island stories, and no answers that could hold weight. Near sunset, a tall figure balanced on the rail as if it were part of him, hat low and coat too dark for heat. He didn't knock or wave. He studied the narrow gap where the doors met, as if light leaking from a cut offended him. Even the room's brightness seemed to pause at that line, gathering itself before crossing. We tried calling security, but the dial tone came in long, tidal breaths that made the handset feel heavier with each attempt. We stood in the center of the room because corners felt like traps and thresholds felt like invitations. He never moved closer, yet his attention kept narrowing until it felt like pressure. We latched the doors and fled to the boardwalk with the urgent politeness of people who don't want to run but must. Lights blinked on exactly as our feet crossed their edges, as if the bulbs knew our pace. The night guard called a taxi boat and told us to keep our eyes on the horizon, not on anything perfectly still in front of it. From the dock, the water wore every lamp twice, each reflection crisp enough to argue with. He watched the seam where wake became pattern, head tilted like he was reading rules written in ripples. We paid early to feel practical, and the receipt looked like permission. The mainland hotel felt wrong in an ordinary way, the kind of wrong that hides in carpets and air conditioners. I slept with the light on and dreamed of Shutter's learning lungs. Our photos later showed the door gap wider than I remembered, which is a strange thing to remember incorrectly. A week later, a night photo of our room arrived in the mail, printed on heavy paper with no return address. I stood in the middle with my eyes closed. My partner slept facing the seam as if listening to it. On the back in a neat hand, someone had written, "You left at low tide." I examined the print for edits and found nothing to hold. A shadow too crisp, a pixel seam, a mismatch of angles. There was only that tall darkness where the two doors failed to meet, like a mouth deciding what to say. At home, the blinds began to sound like those shutters, breathing in a language of slats. Little things aligned themselves now, a towel's edge straight to the jamb, a rug's corner true to the plank. I keep the old tide table on my desk as if math might help, tracing lows and highs with a pen. I don't uncap. When the columns say undecided, I close doors until the rooms feel continuous. Friends ask why we left early, so I talk about a storm that never came and a forecast that spooked us. The simpler truth is sharper. Once you see someone read your world's edges like a locksmith, thresholds stop feeling kind. You start loving the middle of the floor. Stories like this have been submitted by viewers who claim the Hollow Man followed them. If anything strange has happened to you, leave it in the comments. Story 2, The Lighthouse with the Shuttered Eye. We rented a keeper's cottage beside a blind lighthouse because the listing's photos felt clean, almost medicinal. The host's note asked us never to open the sea door and land door at the same time, warning of unpleasant drafts. We laughed, promised to behave, and positioned the note where we could pretend it was quaint. The tower's lids were bolted shut, yet the structure hummed like sleeping machinery that still dreams of work. At dinner, our plates and glasses arranged themselves into a lens without us meaning to, spokes around a center we could not see. Hinges moved too slowly for weather, as if time itself had stuck to the paint. For Blue Hour, we set a tripod in the threshold because that angle looked cinematic on a phone screen. The land door breathed warmth, the sea door's latch sat firm, and the air tasted like metal not from pipes but from attention. On screen, a tall figure aligned with the horizon, slim as the line itself and twice as sure. We backed inside on instinct, keeping the threshold in sight the way you keep the sea in peripheral vision. In one clip, the door sat a finger further open than in the clip before it, though none of us had moved. Around the hinges, fresh scrapes curved into small, incorrect smiles. Air began to push in measured pulses, the cottage acting like bellows we had never rented. Someone suggested opening both doors to equalize pressure, while someone else swore that would invite everything we didn't want. Panic split us into teams that worked against each other, and the house enjoyed the math. I gripped the sea door while another hand threw the land door's deadbolt. The room went tight, then still. From outside, a gloved finger traced the crack along my knuckles without pressing, mapping the relief like a coin rubbing. The touch wasn't force, it was precision. The floor shifted by fractions, left wider and right narrower, as if the cottage had remembered the lighthouse and wished to focus. On the screen, we stood slightly left of ourselves, our doubles holding their breath. He stood slightly right, exact as a metronome, timing us to a cadence we didn't know. We squeezed out through the sink window because small disobedience felt safer than large. The screen tore with a soft seamstress rip, and the cottage outside looked too perfect, a model that had never known wear. The sealed tower didn't turn, yet a slow, circular insistence worked through our bones. On the mangrove bridge, he kept pace where railing shadow met board, step for step without stepping. The leaves shuffled in perfect runs, and the sound felt practiced, like cards learning discipline. We did not look back because looking back felt like opening something with our eyes. At the village square, he held where path met stone, refusing the line of lights like a polite rule breaker. The bartender didn't ask what we'd seen. He poured something strong and said the note came from the last keeper's daughter, who believed in drafts and doors more than ghosts. We believed whatever the glass allowed. We slept over the bar in narrow beds that made turning over feel ceremonial. Across the street, the sealed light seemed to pulse in a rhythm too slow for clocks and too steady for weather. He stared not at us, but at the window frame that cut the room from the night like a careful blade. We boarded the earliest ferry and left keys on the bar the way you leave offerings. The host refunded 2 nights without comment, which felt like knowledge disguised as kindness. In the guest book, on earlier pages, we found half warnings about drafts, opposite doors, and a tall man who only studies joins. I tell myself we disrespected a house's instructions and paid in discomfort rather than disaster. The truer rule sits under that rule. Light loves edges, and so does he. And some places are built almost entirely from edge. If you're still watching, you're not alone. Most people turn this off by now. But you want to see what happens next. Maybe you should stick around, or subscribe before it gets worse. Story 3. The Island That Draws Straight Lines. We chose the atoll because you can walk it in an hour and never lose sight of where you began. The host's welcome talk flowed until she hit a silence that looked rehearsed. A pause folded into her hands. Our cottage sat where reef met lagoon, with a ribbon of sand behind it, like a tie you never quite finish. That night, straight lines appeared in the sand, parallel to the water like underlines drawn by a teacher who grades in silence. No footprints connected them, no drag or scuff to betray the tool. They curved toward our threshold and stopped at the frame as if wood could veto geometry. By morning, the lines had shifted closer to the wall, adjusted by a mind that likes draftsmanship. When we asked, the host dodged with a story about a souvenir kite that flew too straight and refused to bow to gusts. We rented bikes to pretend motion solves design. He appeared at the road's shoulder, upright as wind, deciding to wear a body. His attention fixed on our shadows where tire met grit, studying the exact place we divided the day. When I slowed, his attention slowed, as if the cut mattered more than the cutter. At a mirror and shell shrine, his hat split the horizon in the reflections, giving the sky 2 different weathers to argue. I leaned too close and nicked my forearm on a frame edge that looked kinder than it was. For a second, my mouth in the mirror filled with ocean. Back at the cottage, the lines gathered under the eave like kids testing a boundary with cautious toes. We pushed the couch against the door because bodies want tasks when minds crowd. The shutters latched with a sigh, and the room's light started counting beats. The host checked in with fruit and a practiced brightness. We asked if the atoll drifted. She said drift is our word for the world's constant movement, and that houses stay where they are until they don't. When we turned to show her the marks, the many lines had resolved into one, thin as a decision. We slept in shifts, half awake and pretending that counted as a plan. Around 3, a soft maintenance came from the other side of the door without any voice to carry it. Pressure traced the join like a hand learning a lock it intends to open later. At dawn, the lines had moved inside, clean as underlines on polished floorboards. They reached the bathroom threshold and stopped, as if tile refused to be measured by that particular ruler. We packed fast and replaced everything we'd moved, tidiness as apology. On the ferry, the captain told us to hold the cleanest part of the rail and keep our balance in the middle of the boat. He stood at the stern where wake copies the boat until the copy forgets, gazing into the churn like a scholar of seams. The engine didn't slow, but the idea of speed did. At the dock, every plank behaved because the others agreed, which felt like a temporary peace treaty. He lingered where wood met piling, hat tipped toward invisible small print. Relief arrived, tasted like salt, and left a bureaucratic afterthought. In the security line back home, the curve flattened into a ruler-straight snake, and people's smiles fell by degrees. He let the brim of his hat align with the rope divider for a moment too neat to ignore. I watched it and realized the neat moments are the dangerous ones. Back in our apartment, corners felt newly sharp, like letters cut from tin. I wrote a postcard I never meant to send. We met a man who studies seams and came home with a ruler we can't put down. I feel it in the pause before doors close and in the hush when a call connects. New horror drops every Hollow Wednesday. Subscribe before he finds someone else.